Greetings from Slovakia. My name is Shane McNary. I have served as a representative to the United Nations in Geneva on behalf of Baptist World Alliance since 2013. I've been asked to share a little of my experience or thoughts about what Baptist World Alliance does as far as standing up for freedom of religion or belief or religious freedom for persons around the world. I had the great joy of being able to come under the tutelage of Christer de Lender, who was also a representative to Geneva for Baptist World Alliance. And together with Christer, I was able to learn many things, not only about how to engage in the advocacy process through the United Nations, but also the very strong relational connection to local unions and to local believers that is vital to ongoing advocacy efforts for freedom of religion or belief for all. As part of that training that Christer allowed me to enjoy was an opportunity, for example, to go to a country in Central Asia and offer a training session in freedom of religion or belief for all for a representative group of believers, some 25 assembled from countries in that region. And what that process did was really, again, impressed upon me the importance not only for local people to have correct understanding, correct knowledge, if you will. It's also important to help them see the bigger picture of how they connect in advocacy efforts. The other thing that I inherited from Christer was a deep, abiding faith in the collaborative efforts that will benefit the advocacy work that we're involved in. Beginning at home within the European Baptist Federation, in collaboration with member unions and networks, and in collaboration with International Baptist Theological Studies Center. The EBF has begun to offer a training of the trainers course for people who want to know more about freedom of religion or belief, who want to build upon knowledge that they already have, and then also to see how their knowledge could be shared with others through training events. These events are going to be conducted locally, but with the support of a collaborative network that for now is based in the European Baptist Federation, but will be offered to the wider Baptist family as time goes on. Collaboration is also important because as we speak together with others on matters of vital importance when it comes to religious freedom or freedom of religion or belief for all, what is important is that we do not speak alone. We have our own voice and we speak clearly. And yet when we join in collaborative efforts with others, other national, international, global bodies who are involved in advocacy efforts, then our voice has more weight because we join a chorus of people. Those choruses in collaboration and co-sponsoring of different statements have already been seen in more recent Human Rights Council gatherings as Baptist World Alliance spoke on the issue of believers, Christians, not being allowed to register in Algeria. In other ways, we have collaborated with partners and we gave them the opportunity to speak in places where we could have taken the spot ourselves, but it was more important to, in this collaborative environment, work with others, building goodwill, so that when time comes and we have other means, other opportunities to collaborate together, then those relationships have already been built. When we speak about freedom of religion or belief for all and what advocacy should look like, it grows from the grassroots. It is not a top-led engagement in advocacy efforts, because too often things can be done at, for example, an international level that are so disconnected from life on the ground, if you will, life in the local church, that it almost loses its meaning. For us as Baptists, I can say that the emphasis of the European Baptist Federation is, within a deep partnership with our local unions, local churches, hearing what is the needs in their context, and then taking their lead on matters which they want us to speak about. Then we are able to be better advocates at the national and international levels because we have heard from local Baptist churches. We have heard from local believers. One of the most exciting things in advocating for religious freedom for all was a visitation that I did along with other representatives from European Baptist Federation and then a guest from the United States, was to go into Azerbaijan, a country that has a rather mixed past record on freedom of religion or belief and currently has some more issues coming up. But to be able to go and speak on behalf of the global Baptist family and to speak on behalf of local congregations and advocate with the Azerbaijani government for the right of a local Baptist church to gather together without fear of the police coming in once again and interrupting worship service, arresting the ministers. We were able to seek a way so that that local Baptist church, after decades of being denied the ability to meet, has now been granted. It's not a full open permission, but it is more than what they had before. And for this, we are most thankful. It was hearing from them and what was important to them about their situation, and then speaking directly to the government officials in Azerbaijan and hearing what they had said was possible for these local churches and passing along that information. Relationships are key. And when I think of Pastor Ilya and the others that we met in Azerbaijan, and I think about the opportunity to advocate on their behalf before their own government and be able to bring the voice of the global Baptist family into a conversation on behalf of members of our family who do not enjoy religious freedom like others in our family. Knowing that that church can now gather is a tremendous joy.
In 2018, the Parliament of Bulgaria gave a green light at first reading to proposed modifications of the nation's legislation on religions. The measures included provisions that jeopardized major religious liberties in the country, and faith groups were extremely and seriously alarmed. Constitutional and human rights were threatened by a government that claimed to hold a democratic principle, and under the pretext that the state's intention was to oppose religious extremism and fundamentalist-based terrorism. The new legislation would allow the government to interfere with religious affairs. The problematic articles included a number of restrictions, such as state control over clergy training, governmental filters over international donations to faith groups, censor on sermon and literature content, requirement for religious services to be held only in the Bulgarian language, liturgies and services restricted only to worship buildings, filtering of missionaries and pastoral ministry of non-Bulgarians, a requirement faith groups to have membership of 300 and even 3,000 in order to be able to be registered, as well as special privileges for those who identified themselves being 1% of the population of the country. This intention of Bulgarian lawmakers triggered a massive outcry not only amongst Baptist believers, but also among all evangelical Christians, Catholics, and all other in fact, faith groups. There was no faith community which accepted the suggestions to be normal, despite the fact that some articles favored majority as opposed to minority groups. Still, unprecedented number of statements with legal objections were filled by literally all religious institutions in the country. Baptists and other Christians in Bulgaria got positively and actively engaged in various ways. The Bulgarian church demonstrated that it was awake and spiritually alert. It acted in unity. There was unity among pastors and the various leaders of the different denominations. There was focus on prayer, intercessory, on fasting. Fasting and praying for freedom of belief, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. Also, many peaceful prayer rallies and public protests were held in the capital of the country and in many towns across the country. They were attended by thousands of individuals and were held during the autumn, especially in November and December, which were the two coldest months during Bulgarian winter. Unions and faith organizations called for international support from religious and legal institutions. In response, the European Baptist Federation and the Baptist World Alliance immediately acted. They issued a letter, a joint letter, which was sent to the Prime Minister of Bulgaria, to the Parliament, to the President of Bulgaria, and all other levels accordingly. The same week, many other Baptist unions acted in advocacy and in support. And for example, there were conversations which were initiated with senators and congressmen in the United States, also with the Commission of International Religious Freedom. Many letters were written to the Bulgarian embassies across the globe by many of our unions, many of the Baptist unions. Letters were written also to the Bulgarian government. The issue was raised by the Baptist World Alliance to UN representatives. The World Evangelical Alliance scheduled to hold a meeting with the Bulgarian mission to the UN in Geneva and informed the Special Rapporteur of Freedom of Religion or Belief. Talks on this were also initiated at the European Parliament in Brussels and also at the United Nations in Geneva and many other levels. The General Secretary of the International Association for the Defense of Religious Liberty was also alarmed and took several actions. The result was obvious. On December 21st, just a few days before Christmas, many of those major problematic provisions were brought out. Due to the adequate response of believers within the country and outside of the country, a huge overturn of the original plan took place, alongside with the excitement of the political victory and the cancelled law restrictions. However, Bulgarian Christians continued to be alert in prayer and also in expectation. Bulgarian Baptist faith communities expressed deep appreciation for the timely and the fervent support of the European Baptist Federation, the Baptist World Alliance, the Evangelical European Alliance, the World Evangelical Alliance, and so many other unions and faith communities who acted. Being part of such a large family, such a large and amazing Christian community is a joy and a privilege. This has all been a reminder that no state is an island and that we all need one another's support, one another's intercession for God's kingdom to grow in every country around the world.
I have the special joy now to talk with Raimundo Barreto. Raimundo is a Brazilian minister and professor of world Christianity at Princeton Theological Seminary in the US. He's author of many books and articles, especially on theology and human rights, many dealing with challenges in Latin America. Raimundo also served as the BWA Director of Freedom and Justice from 2010 to 2014. Raimundo, what are your highlights from your years serving in this area at the BWA? How was BWA acting in religious freedom, human rights, and justice in general?
Thank you very much, Andrea, for the opportunity to have this conversation. It's a pleasure to be with you. I was the first director ever of this division that just emerged in 2009. The Division on Freedom and Justice, including freedom of religion and belief, human rights, social and environmental justice, peace and reconciliation, and even Baptist-Muslim relations. And for me, those years were very special because it gave me the opportunity not only to be an agent working together with many Baptists around the world on issues of importance for the lives of many living, particularly in difficult situations, being oppressed because of their faith or because of who they are, the ethnic or racial group that they belong, or living displaced because of a war or conflict. That was very important to be someone connecting voices and faces that tend to be invisible and unheard with people in other places, in other parts of the world, and especially with those in position to make decisions that would affect their lives. But not only that, I also learned so much about the different conflicts and different situations that brothers and sisters around the world face. And so, how important it is for us to have a face in the church that is concerned with public witness, the witness of solidarity, the witness of love, concern with the well-being, not only of those who have the same faith confession that we have, but with people from different backgrounds, and also concern with justice and peace. So those are areas that we acted in many countries, always in partnership with local and national leaders, always at the invitation of those leaders, and acting in the most effective way we could to respond to the needs of those people. So we worked with Burmese refugees. Also, at a time when the military were in power, there were many refugees outside the country. We supported them, we visited them, we brought their needs and concerns to the awareness of international organizations like the UN and other people in position to respond to them. We worked in places where there were conflicts based on religion and tried to promote peace and reconciliation initiatives involving Christians and Muslims, Christians and Buddhists, Christians and Hindus, and learned that all these concerns cannot be treated in isolation. If we speak about religious freedom, for example, there are situations when the main actor that is limiting the practice of a particular religious minority is the state. And usually it's not only one particular group that is targeted, but many. And you have not only to act in relation to the state actor, but also to connect the groups that are suffering the same sort of oppression so that their voice become broader and stronger. There are other situations when the state is actually less of an actor and it acts more passively, just letting the situation go. And you have a religious group oppressing another religious group. It's usually a group that sees themselves as a majority, limiting the action of a group that is a minority. That happens with many Christians in different parts of the world, but it happens also with other minoritized religious groups. Here in the US, we have to stand in solidarity with many of our neighbors who are Muslims, who are Sikhs, who are practitioners of another faith, and who are in the position of being a minority here. The way we treat them usually reflects on the way Christians are being treated in other parts of the world. And I heard that kind of connection being made by people I visited in the Middle East, in Central Asia, in other parts of the world, where they were concerned not only with their own faith, but they were always asking me, please make sure that our churches are not involved in any sort of Islamophobia or Islamophobic actions, are not attacking the groups, because we will be perceived as being part of those who are doing that to others, and we will be the ones suffering the consequences of that kind of situation. So it's a complex picture that requires attention to context, and also a concern with the whole environment in which a problem is happening. It's very difficult to highlight religion in particular without taking into consideration what is in the background. There are problems about land, there are ethnic conflicts, there are power relations that involve more than religion. There are histories of civil wars behind, long history of civil wars. All of those things need to be taken into consideration. And what the BWA did and does and has done for many decades already is to be really concerned with the well-being not only of our brothers and sisters around the world, but with the well-being and peaceful coexistence of everybody in the context where we have been involved as part of that community through our constituency present in that particular context.
I know also that you have engaged in many practical cases, even releasing prisoners. And could you tell us about something about that? And more, what lessons did you learn from that experience? How we can be more effective promoting religious freedom in combating injustice and intolerance?
Yes, there are many critical cases that we were involved, sometimes as the main actors, sometimes as one of many actors. We responded to situations in which Baptist pastors, and I won't mention a particular country, were imprisoned, or situations in which Baptist church was fined by the government. We had the opportunity to go and visit the country and work with the leadership there, but also being a voice to the government and bring the support of the international community to respond to that situation. But also, we were involved in situations that were affecting other Christians, non-Baptist Christians, and even people of other faith who are being treated unjustly and were either in prison or were under some sort of persecution. And in all those cases, there was an element of being careful to hear. First of all, everything begins with hearing. Hear the stories, understand the context, understand who are the actors that might be addressed and how to address them, and working sometimes silently, because just talking about the situation could put someone at risk. So in those contexts, in those situations, I think there are some lessons to be learned. One of them is that no one has the possession of the standard of religious freedom. We have a history as Baptists that from the beginning, because of the way Baptists started both in England and in the US, and their standing on freedom of conscience and freedom of religion, we have a history that has led us as Baptists around the world to be particularly concerned with religious freedom, to make religious freedom a central part of our commitment, because we believe that no one should be subject to the imposition of a faith, regardless of their belief or unbelief. And we have seen since the early 17th century Baptists standing not only for their own freedom and the freedom of their own conscience, but also for the freedom of other neighbors from other faiths to confess their own faith, to practice their own faith, and also stand for the freedom of those who don't proclaim a particular faith. So we have that history, which ties religious freedom very closely to who we are, but no one possesses that. And in the area of practice, we always have to engage with other partners. In most cases, I believe that the effectiveness of our action was more important when we had more partners coming with us, signing a statement with us, sending a document, getting behind us. For example, to send statements and letters to a government that was imprisoning a Christian pastor. It's interesting to see that some of these statements we sent to a government that responded to us were not signed only by Christians, not only by Baptists, but had the partnership of others coming together and understanding that that was an act of solidarity. The same way, we have joined the plight of others. And we understand that by doing that, we are witnessing to the love of Christ, to our solidarity to one another as human beings. That's one thing. The other thing is, when dealing with religious freedom, we have to ask a question that others have asked about human rights in general. Who is the subject of religious freedom? It matters to know who is being expressly oppressed, who is the minority that's suffering any kind of persecution, oppression, limitations on the practice of their faith, and take the action on the perspective of those who are suffering, listening to those who are suffering and being there for them. This makes them not an object but a subject of religious freedom, and helps us understand that these subjects will be different from time to time, in that we have a responsibility to stand in solidarity with them regardless of who they are. And the more we understand that, the more also we will find those who will join us in solidarity when we bring to the fore cases involving our own churches, our own people, our own pastors or individuals that we know in the communities that we work for. So in a country, we have seen Baptists working on behalf of Muslims dealing with Buddhists in a situation of conflict. And that's a very interesting situation, because that is an example of public witness, where you are not the victim, you are not the perpetrator, and yet you are concerned with the well-being of others. All these areas are connected, and we have acted in response to so many cases, bringing together people on the local level, on the national level, and on the international level. I personally accompanied cases in places like Colombia, Nigeria, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Myanmar, Vietnam, and many other countries. What I learned was that none of those situations is disconnected from our reality in other parts of the world. At least we have to be praying for one another and connecting on the spiritual level. Every place I visited, everyone I spoke with, either in a refugee camp or in a situation of scarcity or lack of freedom, they seemed to be pleased with the fact that they were not alone. And they saw in my face, in the face of the others who were with me, the face of a larger family. They would always ask us not to forget them. They would always have messages for us to share with people in other parts of the world. They were concerned with the suffering of others. One of the cases that really impacted me was a visit to a church in Uzbekistan undergoing a difficult moment. And they heard about the earthquake in Japan and heard about conflicts in Nigeria and heard that the BWA was involved in responding to those conflicts. And they raised an offering that same day, an amount that was not large if we put it on the international monetary system, but for them was very significant, particularly in a situation where they were facing their own difficulties. But even when I was hesitant to take it, they said, no, we want to take part in the suffering of our siblings wherever they are. We want to support the efforts that are being made to respond to the suffering of others, of brothers and sisters in Africa or in other parts of Asia. And the same was the case with a visit to a refugee camp in Thailand, talking with young pastors who were suffering their own plight and having to deal with conflicts and scarcity. And they were concerned also with what was happening with brothers and sisters in the US or in other parts of the world. They wanted us to be a messenger for them to our brothers and sisters in other parts of the world. So being in that position allowed me to not only take a message of support and love and solidarity to them, but also hear their voices, bring their voices and their concerns and their solidarity back to a larger family, to the understanding that despite their own plight, they are part of a larger community, of a larger family. I think that's one of the things that makes these international efforts more meaningful. Our participation is significant because we make others feel that they are not alone. We put faces and stories and voices into narratives that we sometimes only hear in terms of numbers. We hear about refugees, but we get to know their faces, and they have voices, they have concern, they have also agency, and we are able to engage them as full persons and bring their concerns back to the larger community. So these are, I think, some of the important experiences that marked me at the time. From time to time, I bring people to speak to my students, and I have somebody whom I met in a refugee camp speaking to them, teaching them about the need for Christians, wherever they are, to be concerned not only with their own local experience, but with the broader family, and to be these public witnesses of Christ through the agency of organizations like the Baptist World Alliance, the Wilberforce, and so many others who are in this position of connecting. For me, these organizations, they are the ones connecting local experience with national action, international action, and back to other local experience. Everybody is placed in a local context. And in that context, there is always something going on, which is important, not only for the people living that context, but which can be meaningful also for people living in other parts of the world. Organizations operating on the national, international level, they connect those experiences and create the opportunity for us to learn from one another, to stand in solidarity with one another, and to be there for one another, showing the face of Christ in the face of a larger family to whoever is experiencing suffering, oppression, persecution, or the limitations imposed by poverty, by environmental degradation, or by war.
Raimundo, thank you for being such an inspiring witness and remembering that we are one with our brothers and sisters all over the world. Would you leave a message for the Baptist community?
By sharing this experience with the BWA in the beginning of the last decade, I didn't want to bring attention to my own action because I was not acting as an individual. I was acting on behalf of a large community of millions and millions of Baptists worldwide, but also many other Christians with whom we partnered and continue to partner to show our love, our concern for a more peaceful world and for a more just society, a better mutual understanding among people who live in a situation that is plural and full of differences. This world that's marked by plurality is also full of conflicts. And some of those conflicts have become violent conflicts. And unfortunately, that's all what one sees in the news is violence, oppression, injustice, which makes us sometimes feel that we cannot do anything. The witness that is provided by communities that come together in the name of Christ to express love and concern, to work with one another, to provide support for one another, not only Christians, but people, human beings, members of the human family. When we do that, we are responding to this situation that seemed to be impossible to solve. And my experience is that everyone can do something to promote some sort of change. We cannot change everything, but the little bit that we can change is meaningful for someone. And every single time that I was visiting a place or corresponding with someone on behalf of the larger Baptist family, I experienced their expressions of gratitude, of thankfulness for the initiative that someone somewhere had to respond to their plight, to their suffering. The world can be a little better if all of us are concerned with doing whatever we can to respond to situations that seem impossible to solve. Wilberforce, BWA are channels for those connections to happen, and also channels for stories that are not known because they happen in local places and are meaningful for someone or some congregations living in a particular situation to be known by others, to be part of a larger network of mutual support and solidarity, which for me are very important if we want to respond as agents of reconciliation, peace, to the call of Christ, the Christian concern for the reconciliation of the world.
Temos a alegria de receber agora o pastor José Dilson. O pastor José Dilson é um ministro presbiteriano brasileiro, missionário no continente africano desde 1990. E ali ele plantou várias igrejas, abriu escolas, centros de cuidado, de nutrição, saúde, cuidado com jovens e adolescentes, esportes, orfanato. E o pastor José Dilson tem uma história muito tocante para compartilhar conosco. Você poderia nos contar um pouco sobre o seu ministério na África?
Em 1990, minha esposa e eu fomos para lá, éramos bem jovenzinhos e chegamos ali em Guiné-Bissau. Guiné-Bissau estava entre as 10 nações mais pobres do mundo e entre as 40 menos evangelizadas, com 94% de analfabetos e uma situação muito difícil. Começamos a desenvolver ministério na área de educação, fomos parte de uma equipe que estava abrindo escolas e essa escola continua lá até hoje com mais de 750 alunos. Deus fez uma transformação naquele país através da área de educação, através também do nosso ministério. Plantamos algumas igrejas, dentre elas a Igreja Presbiteriana da Guiné-Bissau, e abrimos outras igrejas também de outras denominações, porque nós éramos parte de uma missão interdenominacional e por isso nós abrimos igrejas de diversas denominações naquele país. Foi um tempo assim maravilhoso ali, André, onde a gente pôde ver muitos muçulmanos se rendendo a Cristo e tivemos o privilégio de batizar uma centena deles ali naquele país, em torno de 150 muçulmanos nos últimos 4 anos, pessoas que se entregaram ao Senhor. E hoje nós temos o privilégio de ter uma geração de pessoas da etnia fulani que não passaram pelo islamismo, já nasceram no Evangelho. E em 1997, 97, 98, nós passamos por uma guerra civil na Guiné-Bissau e tivemos que sair dali debaixo de tiroteio. A gente estava na capital, muita mortandade, um sofrimento muito grande ali, e a gente conseguiu escapar de barco. Chegamos no Senegal e deixei a minha família no apartamento de um casal de missionários batistas que estavam vindo para o Brasil, e eu voltei sozinho pelo interior e chegamos em Guiné-Bissau. 3 meses depois eu levei a minha família para ali e passamos até o final da guerra naquele país, no meio de tanta atrocidade, tanta coisa terrível, mas muita gente assustada com a guerra, e aí foi uma bênção de Deus a gente estar ali naquele tempo. Teve um pouco de coragem da nossa parte para estar ali, teve, mas teve muita bênção de Deus, muita proteção de Deus, e eu entendo que Deus não chama missionário para a vida fácil. Não existe heroísmo, não existe nada, existe somente paixão e amor por Jesus, pelo Evangelho. É só isso que move o missionário. Muitas vezes a gente está com muito medo no campo missionário, diante de tantas coisas horríveis que acontecem, mas você permanece justamente por causa disso, o amor por Jesus. Eu tive em Guiné-Bissau mais de 40 malárias. Muitas vezes eu estava andando nas ruas com os meus filhos, nos meus braços, também com malária. Eu com malária e eles com malária, à procura de médicos. Situação bem terrível, mas foi uma bênção muito grande. Depois de Guiné-Bissau, depois de quase 14 anos, a gente foi para o Senegal. Ali no Senegal também a gente pôde desenvolver diversos projetos na área social, como escolas. E um dia, André, eu estava andando pelas ruas e veio um menininho na minha direção e ele parou perto de mim, estendeu a sua mãozinha e falou: que a graça e a paz de Alá estejam sobre você. Eu fiquei olhando para ele, tentando identificar de onde ele era, e eu perguntei para ele: onde Yata? Onde eu sou do mar? Onde Nene Macobamamá? E eu estava perguntando: de onde você é? Onde é que estão os seus pais? Onde é que está a sua mãe? Ele baixou a cabecinha e lágrimas começaram a rolar do rostinho dele. E ele disse: Nene amo Kobaba amo Togabussara. Minhata Togabussara. Gabussara é a cidade da Guiné-Bissau onde eu vivi quase 14 anos, naquela cidade, onde a gente estava plantando igreja. E eu estava falando a língua do coração dele, que era o fulani. E ele me contou a história dele, que ele era uma criança muito pequena quando um líder religioso tirou ele da casa dos pais dele, ou seja, o pai dele entregou ele para aquele homem e ele foi levado para as ruas de Dakar, no Senegal, onde ele estava mendigando agora. E tinha uma multidão de crianças, cada uma tentando contar a sua história. A partir dali nós criamos um projeto grande no interior do Senegal, chamado Projeto Abadias. Eram 48 mil metros quadrados. E ali a gente construiu campo de futebol, casa para receber essas crianças, construímos um pomar, uma granja para alimentar essas crianças e começamos a tirar crianças das ruas. Os líderes religiosos ficaram com muita raiva disso. A criança tem que trazer no mínimo $1 por dia para esses líderes. Tem líderes que têm 400 crianças debaixo do poder dele. E quando você bate em algumas portas de organizações, eles dizem isso é cultural. A gente não pode fazer nada por ele. Então, nós fomos ajudar. E começamos a tirar essas crianças das ruas, colocá-las na escola. Tinha professores particular, tinha uma cozinheira só para eles. Tinha a Zeneide, que é da Igreja Batista, que trabalhava no nosso projeto como voluntária ali, servindo de mãe para aquelas crianças. Ela morava lá dentro também, nós morávamos dentro desse projeto também. E um dia um pai chegou lá e encontrou o filho dele lá dentro. O filho dele vivia na rua já há 3 anos, sendo ameaçado de morte e tudo mais. E o pai dele ficou invocado com isso, saiu dali, deu queixa que eu tinha sequestrado o filho dele, convertido o filho dele ao cristianismo. Então o delegado mandou me chamar e eu fui com a Zeneide e lá ele nos deu ordem de prisão e nos prendeu ali naquela delegacia por 48 horas e dali nos mandou para um tribunal onde a gente foi e ficamos 5 meses numa penitenciária, a Zeneide na seção feminina e eu na seção masculina. O filho daquele homem que ele deu queixa de mim hoje já é um jovem de 20 ou 23 anos e ele é um obreiro de tempo integral, isso é muito legal. E o pai dele não conseguiu dissuadi-lo de sua fé em Cristo. Nesse tempo ali, naquela prisão, quando eu cheguei ali, era 11h30 da noite mais ou menos quando eu entrei, tinha vários prisioneiros e um guarda saiu me empurrando com uma certa violência, chegou num lugar assim, os prisioneiros estavam todos nus e outros se despindo e o policial falou comigo, você tira a sua roupa. Depois ele abriu aquele portão e me empurrou para entrar dentro daquela porta, mas antes que eu entrasse ele bateu aquele portão no meu pé, cortou o meu pé. Ele fechou a porta, fiquei ali sangrando, espaço de mais ou menos 40 metros quadrados com 45 prisioneiros. E eu olhei e fiz uma oração. Falei, Senhor, me ajude a transformar as adversidades em oportunidades. Eu quero fazer diferença aqui dentro. Depois eu fui conhecer o banheiro. Pequeno também, buraco no chão, onde 45 homens usavam, uma imundície que você não tem ideia. E eu também orei ali dentro, e a partir dali começamos um ministério dentro daquela prisão. Muita transformação, muita conversão, prisioneiros se entregando ao Senhor, milagres, muita bênção ali dentro. E para concluir essa parte do que a gente fazia ali, sabe que o diretor chegou para mim um dia e falou, eu queria que você fosse no cemitério fazer um funeral. E o diretor me colocou no carro dele e me levou no cemitério para fazer um funeral. E depois ele ficou meu amigo, esse diretor da prisão. E ele falou comigo, você pode construir uma cela aqui dentro para a gente aliviar um pouco essas celas. Muita gente sofrendo, muita gente com tuberculose, com AIDS, piolhos, de problemas de pele, todo mundo junto. Um passo onde eu dormia tinha 30 centímetros de largura. Você tem que dormir o tempo todo de lado e você tinha ainda a opção de dormir ou com a cabeça virada para o corredor, e ninguém dorme com a cabeça virada para o corredor porque à noite pode sofrer um estrangulamento, ou dormir cara a cara com o prisioneiro. Mas aquele diretor pediu, você pode construir uma cela? Eu falei, senhor diretor, eu sou um prisioneiro. Mas eu vou conversar com a minha esposa, se ela topar, a gente vai fazer. E minha esposa topou e a gente construiu uma cela lá dentro. E é interessante que no meio daquela construção, assim, Deus foi me dando muita honra ali dentro. Eu fiquei muito livre ali dentro para poder falar com as pessoas de Jesus, distribuir Bíblias. Eu distribuí mais de 350 Bíblias inteiras, sem contar o número enorme de Novos Testamentos. Foi um tempo muito grande de evangelização e colheita. E chegou o dia da inauguração, o diretor mandou um recado para mim e falou, fala para o José se arrumar porque vai ter inauguração da prisão hoje. E eu fui para lá como parecia um homem livre. E chegou lá, ele fez um discurso emocionado, tinha vários empresários, minha esposa estava lá, que ele havia convidado ela, e ele falou, eu quero convidar o pastor da Silva para cortar a fita de inauguração dessa cela. Eu falei, senhor diretor, Minha esposa trabalhou muito mais aqui do que eu. Eu gostaria dessa honra para ela. E ela cortou aquela fita e a gente pôde entregar para aqueles prisioneiros uma cela maior, que pôde esvaziar várias outras celas. Uma bênção de Deus. Então, por que estou contando isso? Porque muitas vezes Deus te coloca em determinados lugares, é justamente para isso, para transformar as adversidades em oportunidades. Para isso nós somos chamados. Você é um agente de transformação onde quer que você esteja.
Irmão Tira, e principalmente, como foi receber o cuidado de irmãos ao ouvir, ainda na prisão, que muitos estavam orando por você e muitos estavam cuidando, como foi o caso do pastor Antônio Carlos, que atravessou o oceano para estar lá ao seu lado, visitar, levar café da manhã, cuidar da sua família e interceder junto às autoridades pela sua saída. Como foi saber desse cuidado por parte de irmãos?
Muito boa pergunta. Sabe que dentro daquela prisão, eu conto assim, as pessoas pensam, puxa, legal. Mas não foi tão legal assim, porque teve uma pressão muito grande. Eu era o único evangélico no meio daqueles prisioneiros, no meio de assassinos, traficantes, falsificadores. E Deus tirou o medo do meu coração e eu pregava sob pressão, debaixo de opressão, de xingamentos, mas eu não me intimidava e continuei pregando ali. E Deus foi dando graça. E um dos principais prisioneiros, que era o mais medonho de todos ali, todos temiam ele, eu estava orando dizendo, Senhor, eu vou servir esse povo. Falei, Marli, me traga bucha, sabão, água sanitária. Eu comecei a lavar aquele banheiro e deixei ele limpinho, brilhando. Todo dia eu ia para lá e fiz daquele lugar o meu lugar de adoração ao Senhor. Então eu limpava, aproveitava enquanto eu estava esfregando aquelas paredes, eu estava louvando a Deus e orando. E um dia, quando eu cheguei lá dentro, estava aquele homem temível, aquele que todos tinham medo dele. Ele estava com a minha bucha, com a minha água sanitária e o meu sabão, esfregando as paredes. Eu falei, ei, esse é o meu trabalho, é o meu tempo, você está no meu lugar. Eu estava brincando com ele e ele falou assim para mim, eu tenho visto o que você tem feito por nós. Nós não somos merecedores de nada. Você tem lavado os banheiros. Você não precisava fazer isso. Eu aprendi nesse tempo com você que se eu quero ser um líder do meu povo, eu tenho que aprender a servir. E agora eu que vou limpar esse banheiro. O cara virou um amigão meu. Alguém me levou um aparelhinho assim, dava para ver filmes com CDs, e eu botei o filme de Jesus para ele. Esse cara chorava igual uma criança. E um dia meus filhos foram me visitar e eles estavam muito emotivos e começaram a chorar. Ele estava passando e falou, não chora não. Seu pai veio aqui porque Deus mandou ele para cuidar da gente. E foi assim, porta abriu. Então agora, a partir dali, eu pregava abertamente, mais abertamente ainda, ninguém protestava e foi muito bom o que Deus fez no meio daqueles prisioneiros. Existia um grupo, respondendo a sua pergunta, de pessoas muito envolvidas conosco, várias pessoas, tanto da igreja evangélica senegalesa, a igreja evangélica francesa, a igreja brasileira, médicos, tem dois médicos lá, o Dr. Humberto Chagas, junto com o Dr. Júnior, eles iam 2 vezes por semana, revezando entre um e outro, para me ver, para medir minha pressão, ver como é que eu estava, como é que estava a minha glicose, um cuidado assim especial de Deus. E eu lembro que uma das filhinhas do Dr. Humberto, ela falou, o tio precisa comer bolo. Ela fez um brownie para mim e mandou para mim. Eu fiquei muito emocionado de ver o carinho de crianças. E o pastor Antônio Carlos, ele chegou lá praticamente completando o meu 5º mês naquela prisão. Então a presença do pastor Antônio Carlos foi assim muito importante. A pressão que a embaixada sofreu com a presença dele ali. Ele foi um dos que muito nos ajudou ali, mas teve um envolvimento muito grande. Eu soube agora da aliança bíblica, né, que esteve muito envolvida, a Aliança Batista envolvida, a Aliança Batista Mundial envolvida para a minha soltura também. Eu soube do Dr. Raimundo lá em Nova York, trabalhando com os embaixadores. Deus mobilizou o povo dele, gente que nunca tinha pensado em orar por um prisioneiro brasileiro, estava orando por nós lá dentro. E sabe, André, aconteceu uma coisa muito interessante dentro daquela prisão, que todos os dias eu acordava ali, dava uma angústia, eu chorava, chorei todos os dias, chorei 150 dias dentro daquela prisão. Eu acordava e dizia, puxa, eu não devia estar aqui, eu não mereço estar aqui. Vinha uma autopiedade assim enorme. Sabe o que eu fazia? Logo de manhã, eu ia lá para o banheiro, me ajoelhava, agora era um banheiro limpinho que eu mesmo lavava, eu me ajoelhava e falava, Deus, eu preciso da tua graça. Eu não posso entrar em depressão aqui. Essas pessoas já estão sofrendo aqui dentro. Eu quero ser luz, eu quero ser bênção para elas. Me dê da tua graça. Eu aprendi que a graça de Deus pode ser também diária como maná. E parecia toque de mágica. Eu me levantava reconfortado e saía por ali confortando outros, porque eu creio que não era somente a minha oração, era a oração de milhares de servos e servas de Jesus ao redor do mundo orando para mim. Em Guiné-Bissau a gente costuma falar uma frase assim muito legal, eu acho, se um sou insultado, a nós tudo na ora. Se um só está apanhando, todos nós choramos. Então todos estavam chorando a minha surra ali dentro. Mas Deus foi fiel. E eu louvo a Deus porque a presença física do pastor Antônio Carlos foi muito boa ali dentro. Porque ele fez uma pressão. Então a embaixadora pensava, esse senhor é um ativista, esse pastor é um ativista. Então ele vai melhor fazer algumas coisas. Então foi muito positiva a presença dele. E eu tenho muita gratidão a Deus por ele estar ali.
O irmão mencionou um versículo, né, que se uma parte do corpo sofre, todos sofremos juntos. Qual é a mensagem que o irmão gostaria de deixar para a igreja, tanto para a igreja que vive em contextos de maior liberdade, como a igreja que persevera em meio a restrições e a perseguição?
Aqueles que estão sofrendo, que estão passando por situações difíceis, nós temos irmãos nossos agora, enquanto a gente está falando, se coincidir com um fuso horário, eles estão agora com muito frio no deserto, presos em contentores, em containers no deserto ali na Eritreia, no Paquistão, no Afeganistão, na Coreia do Norte, no Iêmen. Pessoas sofrendo muito, muito por causa do Evangelho, pessoas sendo torturadas, humilhadas por causa do Evangelho. Se essas pessoas me ouvirem um dia, eu quero dizer para elas, aguenta firme. O Senhor vai transformar a sua adversidade em uma oportunidade. Ele está aí presente com você para aliviar as dores dos chicotes, dos socos, das humilhações. Ele está presente. Ele permite porque ele sabe que pode permitir para uma glória maior. A gente não tem como entender isso. Eu não entendia porque que eu estava ali preso. Eu não entendia as humilhações que eu passava ali dentro, mas eu tinha plena certeza, o meu Senhor estava preso comigo. Ele estava ali. A minha prisão era a prisão de Jesus. A minha cadeia era a cadeia de Jesus. E você que está passando por sofrimento, quaisquer que seja a perseguição, aguente firme, glorifique o Senhor, faça como Paulo e Silas. Comece a cantar, não deixe que o sofrimento abafe você, abafe a voz de Deus no seu coração. E para você que está livre, aproveite da sua liberdade para glorificar o nome de Cristo. Abra sua boca, fale mais, cante mais, glorifique mais, ore mais. Envie cartas. Eu fui tão confortado com tantas mensagens que eu recebi dentro daquela prisão. Tinha uma irmã que ela só mandava piadas para mim. Achei muito interessante porque eu ria demais ali dentro com as piadas que ela mandava. Então, outros mandavam um versículo bíblico, simplesmente falavam, irmãos, aguenta firme. Essa hora de aflição vai passar. Deus está aí com você. Então, se envolva. Lembre de estar orando, gastando um tempo. Se cada um dos cristãos livres gastar, André, 1 minuto por dia de oração pelo perseguido, vai acontecer uma revolução no campo de perseguição. 1 minuto. Então, se você ore pelo menos 1 minuto cada dia pelos cristãos que estão sendo perseguidos. Sabe que eu orei muito por aquelas meninas que foram sequestradas ali pelo Boko Haram. 250 meninas. Então ore mais por esses que estão aprisionados. E o nome do Senhor vai ser glorificado.